guys can hear me? Can you hear me now? All right. For the people in the cheap seats, I'm Matt Doyle, President of the Chamber of Commerce here in Sackets Harbor. I welcome you all to Meet the Candidates Night 2021. And I'll read you the dates. October 31st, we're going to be putting on a trunk or treat and Harvest Fest here in the village. Weekend December 11th and 12th, we're putting on Whoville. And New Year's Eve, keep your eyes open. We're going to be advertising for New Year's Eve
Ball or semi-formal.
Semi-formal here at the ballroom. So that should be a fun time. We can rock into the new year. All right. I'd like to introduce Scott Atkinson. He's going to be our moderator this evening. Do you guys hear me? Okay. So Scott Atkinson, he will be the moderator this evening for the debate. And take it away.
Question, can you folks all hear me if I don't use the microphone? No. Microphones make me very nervous. All right. Well, first a couple of thanks in order. I want to thank the Chamber of Commerce for holding this event in an age when it seems like all we do is tweet and text each other and like each other on Facebook. I think there's a lot to be said for having people gather in real time together to answer questions in person. So this is a valuable service, and I'm glad it has been done. I'm also really impressed by the turnout tonight. When I did this in Watertown a week or so ago, I didn't get anywhere near the crowd that we got tonight. So you all deserve a round of applause for showing up. And speaking of showing up, I want to thank the candidates for showing up and agreeing to answer questions. It takes a certain amount of courage to do what they're doing. I've never run for public office, and chances are most of you have never run for public office. But you learn a lot about yourself when you do this job. Go out and try to convince your friends and neighbors to vote for you. Sometimes you find out you're not the popular, wonderful person you thought you were. So I think we commend you for giving it a shot. A couple of personal notes before we get to the rules. I've been doing this for a long time, but obviously I'm now the resident of Sackets Harbor. So if I say something stupid or out of context tonight, I hope somebody corrects me. I won't be offended. The point of doing this is to get the best information possible out to everybody. So please feel free to say, no, that's wrong. The other thing is, I'm the retired or semi-retired news director of Channel 7. John Nelson, my longtime assistant, is now the news director. And my retirement job is I fill in for lots of other people when they're on vacation and they have other things to do. And this week, I'm filling in for the morning web writer, which means I get up at 4 in the morning. So if you see me grabbing onto the podium and or yawning and or my eyes are closing, please don't be offended. It does not mean that I'm passing judgment on what goes on here tonight. All it means is that I'm an old man and all this. Now, with that said, there are some rules to go through for the forum tonight. Each candidate will be allowed 3 minutes to reply to questions. No direct responses. In other words, you can't speak directly to the members of the public that are out there. So just direct your comments to everybody in the room. And questions that are submitted to the floor, which are not presented tonight, will be submitted to the candidates in writing so that they can respond in writing. And the chamber, as I understand it, is going to publish them in some fashion between now and election day. Is that correct?
What was the question?
That sometime between now and election day, you'll take any questions that don't get answered tonight. We'll put out some kind of publication so that people can see the answers.
Yeah, I'll be sure to do that. Yep, the answer is.
Okay, so that's how we're going to do things tonight. In the back, I see the gentleman in the yellow vest are going to be doing the times for me. For 1 minute, hold your arm up like this, and when it's time for everybody to be quiet, do this. Okay? Got it. That's 1 minute. That's shut up. All right, let's start with opening statements. For that, we'll start with doing alphabetical order tonight. So we'll start with Mr. Bray. You put the first one.
Great. Thank you. Why am I here? I'm here because I enjoy the business of local government. I'm here because I love Sackets Harbor. I like living among the history and the beautiful architecture that we share. I like living in this village, the village that I have found always seems welcoming to new people. I'm here to give voters a choice. I'm here because I think I can guide this village and lead the village board. I I have the experience and knowledge of how the village government runs after serving 2 terms on the village board. And I am here because I want Sackets Harbor to continue to be a better place for everyone. I am here because I want to be your mayor.
Move on to, Morgia. I don't matter of policies, why don't we hold our applause for that? We'll give everybody a round of applause at the end of the evening, okay? Alex, go ahead.
Thank you. Hey everyone, I'm Alex Morgia. I moved to Sackets about 6 years ago. Basically, as soon as there was a full season camp open at Morgia Beach, I thought I spent my childhood here in the summers as often as I could get it. I've run a couple of local businesses. My primary business is multi-boxer. We ship 30,000 packages a month out of the warehouse in Watertown. 40 employees there, and we're opening a wine and liquor shop here on Main Street in Sackets in the next couple of weeks. I'm running for mayor of Sackets because I think Sackets needs enthusiastic and energetic leadership. I started campaigning in May. I've tried to campaign on my intent to be one if I have the job, which is to be involved in as many things as possible. So over the summer, I started running the Sackets Harbor Community Farm Stand, where a lot of you met me out on the lawn on Saturdays. We started repairing a sign out on Route 3 that had been bleached by the sun for 20 years. I was on the Can-Am committee that ran the car show this year because Dean wasn't up to the challenge. I thought we needed more events in the village. We were gone to every town board meeting, every village meeting since May, gone to the chamber meetings, and generally I think there's a bit of a disconnect between the residents of the village and the leadership where, and I've learned this from a lot of people when I was canvassing door to door, there's an expectation that a lot of their concerns they fall on deaf ears if you bring it up with the village. And things like the website being out of date and hard to use don't give the impression that there's a strong communication between the public and the village leadership. Those are things that I think we really need to change. We should be recording our board meetings so that people who can't come at 6:30 still have an opportunity to participate. And generally speaking, the fewer people that are involved in our decisions, the worse those decisions are going to be. And so we want to make sure that everyone feels like their involvement is encouraged and valued. And that's something I hope to change. Thanks.
Quick question before Marc starts. Everybody here, everything okay? Everybody's okay? All right. Marc.
Great, thank you. Well, welcome everybody. I want to thank the chamber for putting this on. This is a very important event. This is a terrific way for you to really understand the platforms of each of us and the vision of each of us. I want to thank my fellow candidates too. I really appreciate sharing the stage, and I know since Jamie served on the village board, he has valuable insights. I know Alex has been working hard in the community, and those are important. So no matter what happens, I think there's value for all of us to continue to serve this village. I've been in the village for a generation, for over 20 years. I raised my daughter, my wife and I raised our daughter here in Sackets Harbor Central School District. And since really 2000, I have been involved in countless volunteer hours with nearly every single community organization. The library, helping them train their board members, to the battlefield. I served as chamber president and a member of the chamber for years. So I have the community experience. I also have government experience. Local government experience. This is my third term, not in a row. I served 2 terms in the early 2000s, and I just got back on the board last year. Public service is just a passion. I've done it pretty much all my life, whether it be nonprofit community organizations or this village. I actually even teach government courses at the college. It's vitally important that experience is present in the village board. And My vision for this village is that we listen to local residents as well as that we properly manage our infrastructure as Jamie said. But beyond that, I think we have an opportunity coming up to build a thriving community together. That is to say that we encourage local development of residences. We have at least four developments out there, bringing more residents to the village, spreads out our tax burden. It is a good thing to get those housing developments filled. It will add more users to our water and sewer. Those kinds of things are really important. And I think the pinnacle of that is to market this village to get more residents, as well, working with the downtown businesses. I have a vision to help businesses.
Marc, we'll stop it right there.
And I'll stop right there. You'll probably hear more about it later.
Thank you. All right, we've got a bunch of questions that were submitted ahead of time that I have to read tonight. The first question will start with Alex Morgia answering it. The question is, for years the focus has been on the local businesses on Main Street. What will you do to show support for the residents as well? Alex, you start.
Thanks, Scott. First off, I respectfully have to reject the premise that the village's focus has been on Main Street businesses, not on the residents. I think most of the business owners will tell you they could use more support, not less. And if you look at the village budget, there's not a ton of money that goes directly towards Main Street businesses, and there's not a ton of time on the village side that goes towards bringing business downtown as much as we could. I also don't think it's entirely accurate to portray the Main Street businesses as in competition with residents. Generally speaking, I focused a lot on Main Street during my campaigning because I think the health of Main Street and its businesses is the bellwether of the health of Sackets in general. People live here for a few reasons, right? They live here for the natural beauty, they live here for the historical significance. But by and large, when people come here, they want to take advantage of the walkability of Sackets. They want their kids to be able to go down to Krispy Kreme's and get a cookie if they got an A on the test. Our Main Street businesses are an important part of the ethos of Sackets, and a strong business core means a lot of things. It means a well-funded chamber. It means businesses can afford to do things like sponsor youth athletic jerseys, right? In Watertown, a lot of the youth baseball or soccer jerseys are sponsored by different restaurants and things. In order for our businesses to be able to afford to do that, they need to have profitable and strong businesses so they can afford to do sponsorships like that, be good community members, and fund the Chamber of Commerce so that they can do things like put on this event. New residents here, a lot of people that are in this room actually are relatively new to Sackets. And new residents often move here because they visit, they enjoy walking around Main Street, going to the parks, going to the battlefield, and they decide to move in. And as Marc said, new residents help spread the cost around for our fixed costs of things like water, sewer, but they also invest in the community. They start new businesses, and generally speaking, I think one hand feeds the other. So it's important for us to support the Main Street businesses because they are, in some ways, the lifeblood of the village.
Marc Pacilio, you're next.
Thank you. So I live in the heart of the village, right on Broad Street. And I used to live in the barracks a long time ago. I think the residents in this village are extremely important. They deserve a return on their investment of moving and living in Sackets Harbor. And so we need to be thinking about the residents. And that's why I said that we want to do all that we can to either maintain or even reduce where we can, cost and fees to residents. One example that I'm going to be putting forward is just our zoning permits for small residential projects, putting a front door in, or replacing a window. It's a $50 fee for a resident. That does not encourage a resident to make an improvement. It discourages residents. So that's one thing that we ought to be doing for residents, thinking about them. Now, not just doing handouts and freebies, but really critically thinking about that. We also, again, I think, in thinking about total cost, and I know we're going to cover this later, but, you know, we will look at our tax rate. It is the second lowest municipal tax rate in the county. So we've maintained it for years. And that's because we have decent property values, and we have had residents move to the village, and we need to be able to continue to do that. The business community, extremely important. So there's a balance. Residents ought to be encouraged to visit our downtown businesses. You know, years ago, I used to hear residents say, well, we don't even bother because it's tourist season. We don't even go downtown. Well, I'd like to encourage that our local residents to work with our business community. I've got some strategy plans that help us to bring that to fruition. Comprehensive planning downtown to better manage our assets will be helpful to the residents and it controls costs.
All right, James Bray.
What will I do to show support for residents? As a board member, I've always felt that good stewardship of taxpayers' money is the most important job and the best thing we can do for our residents. I've always looked for ways to save the village money while providing better service. Some examples are, one of the things that we did as a board when I was on it is we made an agreement with National Grid to change our street lights to LEDs. This will save the village about $10,000 a year. Things like this help. Another important thing is to make sure that everyone is playing by the same rule. At a very recent board meeting, there was talk of the village taking over some roads that are not built to the village standards. If the village was to accept these roads, then the village is liable to maintain these. This could be an unnecessary risk to the taxpayers. There's a similar situation with another developer in 2014 and 2015 when I was on the planning board. I've always steadfast believed that the same rules should apply for everyone. The taxpayers should not subsidize our businesses. And as far as the village supporting Main Street, the village does do quite a bit for the Main Street businesses and all the businesses in town with our marketing committee and our camping festival budget.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. All right, the next question, we'll start with Marc Pacilio for this one. Here's the question. We are the only community with high taxes and no garbage pickup for residents. What will you do to fix this issue?
This is an issue that's been talked about recently. Again, I want to stress that the village taxes, the municipal tax rate is not high. So I understand people will look at the school taxes and they'll group them together, but we're not responsible for the school tax. The village board has a tax levy. Right now it's $2.80 per thousand. I don't really want to add to that tax levy. I've just recently been talking about, you know, what we could do to lower our tax rate. And the issue of garbage came up, and the issue of mixed-use recycling. Well, we know that the Development Authority of the North Country said no to mixed-use recycling. In 3 counties, not enough users. Fort Drum is now researching this. If Fort Drum goes for it, then maybe we can piggyback in Watertown. In terms of garbage pickup, there are at least 4 contractors in the village. At least 4. 2 are local folks. So if the village decides ever to bid that out, they're going to bid it out too, and there'll be at least 4 bids in, most likely. I think Waste Management, unfortunately, the big guy, would get the bid, and we put local folks out. I'm not really sure this is a burden. We don't pay that much privately massively for garbage. I think the additional maybe $200,000, and that's just a quick estimate. We should do a better research on that, but would bring tax rates up. And don't forget, property taxes are regressive. So the person with the $400,000 house is going to pay a lot more for garbage pickup if we use garbage pickup municipal. So that's my kind of stance on that issue.
James Bray, you're next.
What will I do to fix the trash pickup issue?
Oops, sorry.
It's difficult with a mic when you're not used to it. I agree with Mark that our taxes are not higher. The village tax rate, $2.80 per thousand, it's been the same for 12 years. It is one of the lower rates. No one gets their trash picked up for free. You know, you pay for it through your taxes or you pay for it through a vendor you choose. I've had estimates between $76,000 to $100,000 minimally for a garbage pickup in the village. So then the question is, how do you fairly charge residents? Does a family of 6 pay the same as an elderly person living alone? What about businesses? How are they charged? What about apartment complexes? It's a very complicated issue. You know, do the village residents want to give up the personal service they have now in exchange for the low bid service that the village would have to provide? We also have local businesses that are supported, that we support through choosing our own contractors. So I really don't see this as a problem.
So this is actually something that was discussed on lockdown Sackets Harbor recently. I posted about it, picked up some trash on Adams Road through the school dumpster, and had me thinking more about the trash service. Earlier this year, we had a bit of a debacle with the recycling center moving from within the village to out of the town barn. Largely, that was because someone was dumping the trash there. A problem I had with that solution is someone is going out of their way to bring their trash somewhere. Now, obviously, it's better than them throwing it off the side of the truck, off the side of the road, but clearly they're not willing to pay for trash. They're trying to bring it somewhere they can get rid of it for free. And personally, you know, when people do that, the DPW goes and picks it up, so we pay for that labor, and then we have to pay for the fees of the dump anyway. So it may be in our best interest to have something like a public dumpster. Most people don't want to put their trash in their car. They'd rather pay a local to come pick it up. But if we have people who are willing to drive their trash, you know, down Route 3, wait till they don't see anyone behind them at night, throw it off the side of their truck, we probably don't want to deal with picking up that litter. It actually would be more cost effective as a village to just have a public dumpster that we say, if you must throw away your trash somewhere, please put it here. So that's not getting into the lake, rivers. One of the main concerns on that Facebook post was if we did public trash, we would be competing with local contractors. And I actually talked with Marc today because I didn't want to speak to the trash situation without at least getting his opinion. And he has actually bid out contracts with villages before in Brownville. He lost the contract, but they had issues with the low bid vendor. And to both of these guys' point, you know, we don't want to go with the low bid and get bad service, but the local vendors, you know, we can actually write the bidding in a way that gives a preference. We're not really comparing apples to apples when we say, well, if we're going to lose that local touch, we're not going to be able to call and get exceptions, and they're not going to like go to the back of the driveway and help an older resident move their trash if it's not brought to the street like Marc might. So those are things that, you know, to me, the important thing is not necessarily that we do public pickup for trash, but that we have more of these open discussions. I think there was something like 42 comments on this post on Facebook of people going back and forth about, you know, trash and whether or not it's our duty as stewards of the lake to make sure that there aren't people littering and make it as easy as possible for people to throw away their garbage, whether they're residents or not.
Alex, we'll leave it there for the moment. Mr. Bray, you got the first shot at this next question. Why are wood and metal fences considered acceptable and vinyl and chain link fences not? Wood rots rather quickly and it's worse than vinyl or chain link wood. Who are the restrictions supposed to really benefit?
Okay. Well, actually, the zoning law states wood or metal, brick, fieldstone, or synthetic equivalent similar in appearance to original or natural materials. Vinyl has been approved. Chain link is approved for certain uses. As far as who are the restrictions supposed to benefit, these restrictions benefit every property owner in the village, as does our well thought out and strong zoning law. This is why people want to live in Sackets. It helps to maintain the character of our village. This is also why our village continues to grow. My guess is we have more new homes in Sackets Harbor than any other village in upstate New York. This strong zoning makes our community strong and makes people want to be here.
Alex, you're next.
The question is about fencing, but I think the zoning and historical district rules are in place for good reason. Obviously, we don't want them to be an encumbrance to people. Like Marc said before, with the permitting, we want to encourage people to invest in their homes, invest in upkeep. Maybe not everyone can install an ornate metal fence, but there's a difference between a vinyl fence that's just that standard white plastic you buy at Home Depot and bulk versus one that's made to look like real wood, and they do last a lot longer. We have rules in place in the village, I think, that could use revision. With maintenance for historical district properties, while we do want to preserve the character of these buildings and maintain the look and feel of the village, it isn't necessarily the best use of our regulations to prevent people from, for example, putting modern windows in that look like wood, but are made from composite materials that are more efficient, that last 50 years instead of 10. A lot of these older homes are sitting for years without somebody putting money into them because it's quite expensive to maintain. And insofar as we can think critically about what our rules and regulations are there for, and make sure that we're not putting undue burdens on homeowners, fencing is a simple one. And the answer may be we just haven't done a good job to make sure that people know that vinyl fencing is actually acceptable if it's a facsimile of wood and not just a plastic thickness. I think generally it's important to routinely revisit our rules and regulations and make sure that they are accomplishing the goals that they were set out for and not just being remnants of intentions from before that may not be serving the original purpose. Those are questions that are ultimately the zoning boards to answer, but I think as someone in a position of mayor can encourage them to revisit those.
Public service announcement. If you are considering some modification or fence or some door change or window change, please call the village office. Jim Corbett, our zoning enforcement officer, will get in touch with you. You can discuss these items with him. And that's really important. I think you just touched on that communicating the fact that Jim is available is really important. I'm not going to belabor this particular issue. I think it was fairly well explained. I think by and large, most folks in the village, make the appropriate alterations and follow the zoning laws. We have a great planning board that reviews every single application. And I think that, again, this is where it's important to understand this village is mostly an historic overlay district. All right, it's on the national register. So you just think about that. Think about when you drive anywhere and see, how it's on the National Historic Register. Everything looks as it was historically. Same thing with 3/4 of this village. And I think our zoning laws are dealing with this appropriately.
All right, I'll forward will lead off to the next question. The question is, will your focus be on allowing all construction in the area, or will it truly be on what is best for the residents?
Thanks. I think actually this question was probably directed at Jamie. During our interviews with Seven News, they edited it, made it seem like he was hoping to develop the LDC property, possibly himself. Obviously, that's not, I don't think it's intended, but I don't think any of us up here think that we should allow any and all construction, nor if we did, would that be something in our control. As we've just discussed, the zoning and planning boards are an integral part of the village, and we have these regulations in place to make sure that no one's building things that don't know where they're building them, right? So we have residential districts, we have commercial districts, we have industrial districts. But what's important is, and this has come up a few times, we don't want to get in the way of the construction that we do want, right? So sometimes I think the perception is that the goal of regulation is to prevent development, and that's not the case. And when that happens, it's a failing of regulation, not its original intent. We have a piece of property that's being developed by a local businessman, John Kent. He's building a warehouse and training facility for glass installers. And, right now, he's actually renting space in my warehouse in Watertown until the building gets built. But once that is completed, he's going to have 6 to 12 contractors visiting the village year-round, training on how to install glass in homes to get certified, and they'll be staying at local hotels. They'll be visiting the village, going to local restaurants. If they enjoy it, they have a good time, bring their family back a few weeks later to spend some time here in the summer. Those sort of incremental development projects are really important, and they help. Another thing that's come up a few times is they help defer the fixed costs. We have electric, sewer, and water systems that can support quite a bit more than we have already here, and those high costs go away or get diminished if it's spread amongst more people. So, those small incremental developments, building a new industrial building, building a new commercial building, building new homes, they kick off a virtuous cycle of development where people want to move here, so they build more homes, which supports local businesses. Those businesses do better, which attracts more people. And that's an important thing to encourage.
Marc, your next.
I interpreted that question to be that in terms of what we have going on now. I spoke earlier of those developments, Sackets Meadows, Battlefield Commons, and a few other developments, a couple that are in the wings and are waiting for planning board action and village board action. But we have developments that go through the process. They make the full application. It's examined for environmental. It's examined for historic overlay measure. And at the end of the day, those developments are going forward. Do we allow construction? And when I read that, I simply think that you mean other developments. If there's a purchase of land by someone and they go through our process, again, the planning board does a great job. Members of our community who are well versed in zoning laws, they're reviewing it. So construction is allowed where it is permitted.
Right.
Okay. I kind of agree with Alex, and I kind of feel that this question might have been focused on me. Personally, I have no interest in developing anything other than my own little residential property that I do. As far as the question, my focus will always be on what's best for this village. Main Street, your street, my street, every street. I don't think every kind of construction fits in this village. I favor development that's geared toward tourism, things that bring more people into the village, things that sell more lunches downtown, while maintaining the village character.
All right, next question, we'll start with Marc for this one. There was talk of lifting sound and noise restrictions. Residents shouldn't have to deal with intrusive noise. What is your stance on this issue?
Well, we've had the noise ordinance in the village for longer than I've been here. And it's been modified a few times, even the 80s. And I have to say that very few people take issue with the noise ordinance. We know, particularly in the summertime, when there's live entertainment outside, that and there's kind of an agreement in the village for some establishments that, after 10 o'clock, you just need to shut it down. And by and large, the businesses have. All of our events end at 10 o'clock. So, if there's a complaint or two, we can talk about it. We also have to figure out how to measure that complaint. Because it takes a calibrated instrument on an iPhone with an app to measure noise. And I'm not sure that people own those $300 and $400 instruments to correctly, measure noise. So I want to be careful there. I absolutely take a village complaint, a residence complaint seriously, meaning we should look into it. And we've already spoken with our police department to try to verify the one or two complaints that we've had. Again, but overall, I think we have a really decent noise ordinance, and I believe that everybody's generally okay with it.
Mr. Bray.
I don't think the law is written. I don't think the law is written to stifle any business. The law protects the happiness and well-being of residents. The law also allows anyone to petition the village board for a variance. I'm in favor of the law as it's written. And I just want to mention that although my answers are short and concise, I gave a lot of thought into all this, and I just don't want to burden you with extra verbiage that I feel is unnecessary. So even though my answers are short, the thought that went into all this was there.
Alex Morgan.
Next. This question is definitely my fault. So, I actually think,
Is the question, right?
it's the same.
Next question.
I brought up the noise complaint, or the noise ordinance a few times, and my intention was not to say, if I'm elected, I'm going to do the noise complaint. My intention is to say, we need to make sure that the noise ordinance is doing what it should be. I have a family friend, Leo Coleman, I used to own the Barracks Inn. He runs the fairgrounds in Watertown and Holmes Corners. He's run successful restaurants longer than I've been alive. And when Tim Pan first closed, I called him and I said, Leo, would you guys ever pick it up? Because Sackets it's going to hurt Sackets pretty bad if Tim Pan is shut down. And he said, we won't run a restaurant in Sackets again unless things change dramatically, because we would get fined every time we have a wedding. You can't have a wedding venue where if you don't shut the music down at 10:01, you're going to get with a fine. And I think those are the sort of things that, Friday and Saturday in the summer, 10 o'clock is a fine time during the school year. Maybe we want it earlier on Wednesdays and Thursdays during the school year. But the sunset is around 9:30 in mid-July, and businesses like Tim Pan, they're a ghost town at 10:05, and they only have about 10 weeks every summer to make their money. And I think it's important to look at what our noise ordinances do to those businesses, and maybe we want the decibel levels to be lower, but they have to shut down their outside music at 10 o'clock. I think in the summer might be a little early. But again, that's not something that is a decision that the mayor makes. My goal is to try to encourage everyone to have open discussions about these things. And rather than say, 5 people complained, so we're going to move it to 9, think we should do things like say, okay, 5 people complain, like as Mark said, that's a good reason to open a discussion. Maybe pull a few dozen people around Main Street, a few dozen people around the barracks, and say, well, what do we actually think makes sense here? Do we want to have maybe it's a fast track variance application for weddings, so that when someone has a wedding, it's a quick and easy thing to say, actually, we're allowed to have music until 11 o'clock. Weddings are typically, they're playing Van Morrison, it's, their grandparents are in the room, it's not going to get too rowdy. And those are the sort of things that I think are good for us to be able to discuss as a village and make sure that we're not just saying, oh, squeaky wheel gets the grease. Somebody sent a letter to the mayor that said it was too loud at 9:30 at a meeting a few months ago. And the first thing that Eric said was maybe should
One
change
minute,
it.
Mr. Bray, you've got the next question. How are you going to reduce the exorbitant cost of water to village residents and the even higher cost to town residents?
I never thought our water costs were exorbitant, so I made a few phone calls and I confirmed what I thought. We're right in line with equal municipalities who have updated water systems. As far as the town, we charge the town $4 per 1,000 gallons. That's what it costs the village. The town of Watertown charges $6.50 per 1,000. So we're in line where we should be. We've been able to do improvements needed all the while keeping our water rates stable and actually lowering them twice since I've been in town. We have a $5 million water plant and a $14 million sewer plant that only has 800 users. We have saved money for our share of the improvements, and again, we're doing as good as we can with this, and I don't think our water costs are exorbitant at all.
Alex?
Yeah, generally speaking, I agree there. I pulled some numbers today. We're in the middle of the pack. We're a little higher than average, but certainly not on the high end as far as water costs go. There are some things that we do with water and sewer that I think could be done differently. For example, the water tank, your sewer bill is a percentage of your water bill under the assumption that you're putting as much water through the sewer as you're pulling in your meter. And here in Sackets, we have like a fixed, one residence is one sewage unit. Different businesses are different levels. The hotel is 7. And those sort of things, I think there's probably a more equitable solution if we said, let's actually look at billing the sewage use in line with water use. But even then, we're more or less in line with the statewide average. Another thing to mention is our water quality is, James said our plants are relatively new and high quality, but the water quality itself is very good. When I first moved here, I was reading an article about Flint, Michigan, and I remember thinking, how is it that no one in the town tested their water for 20 years? I thought, I've never tested my water ever. So I bought a test kit. We scored perfect score on no lead, no bacteria, no precipitants. So we do get a pretty high quality product for our dollar here. One thing I think that we could do better is, no one wants to hear the answer of like, actually it's not that expensive when they feel like this is a high bill. I think we could do a better job village-wide about explaining where, we have the budget available, but it's hard for most people to read through it. And I think we could do a better job of explaining where your tax dollars are going, what the water bill is actually for, right? Where you're not just paying for water usage, you're paying for this plant. It's, if not state-of-the-art, it's very new. And those are things that I think can kind of take the edge off. People feel like their bills for taxes and water are high, but partly that's because they're not getting communicated to about where that money's going and how it's being used. I think we could improve.
Generally, I think it's been well explained, but let me just talk a little bit about planning. It's really important. Back when I first served on the board, we had introduced, we knew we were going to have to do major improvements to our sewer facility. So we actually, raised sewer rates $5 a quarter for a number of years, very slowly, and then we're able to pay for those improvements, without having to borrow the formula. And I think the same thing is going to be happening to the water treatment plant because we are planning. I know some villages that their residents were paying that same rate, and all of a sudden, the rate shot up $75, or some exorbitant percentage. And that's a surprise and a shock to those residents to raise the rate that much in one quarter. So we did it slowly, we planned, and we've done it again. And I think that's an example of being good stewards of your job. And by the way, just to harp on the water quality, we're also very lucky that we draw from the lake, the biggest freshwater basin in the country. Most of the towns and villages in New York and much of the country, of course, are getting their water from wells. We get our water from Lake Ontario. It's processed differently, and it's higher quality. And we don't have droughts because the lake does not dry up. Well, it doesn't dry up yet.
Alex, on the next question. But before we get to that point, Anna, let me ask you a question. We're running well ahead of schedule at this point. Do you want to solicit questions from the audience in writing at this point? Do you want more questions? We're going to be done by 8:15, 8:20, I would suspect.
Yeah, why don't, we'll get a couple questions from the audience.
All right. So if you've got questions, folks, why don't you write them down and see if you can pass them up to Anna?
Yes.
If you can. That might work. All right, Alex, you lead off with this next question. Good. Why do some residents have no pictures of their homes in the GIS parcel search, while upgrades aren't shown or mentioned?
Just looked into this question a little bit. My understanding is the town has an assessor, and this is also managed through the county to some extent. But we have about a 10-year rotating cycle where we reassess properties, and it's kind of like a very unexciting lottery. Everyone hopes that their house doesn't get reassessed, sometimes it does, and rather than, let's say homes appreciate 5% a year, after 10 years that's 62%, and rather than have a tax increase that marches upward as your house value goes up, you get used to this price, and then all of a sudden it jumps, and it can as much as double in some places. Now, that's not something that's really under the purview of the Sackets board to change. But again, like so many of these questions, sometimes the best thing we can do is just communicate that clearly so that people understand, well, you're actually underpaying your taxes for about 5 out of those 10 years if you assume, if you drew the curve, you're going up steps. And that means when the bill finally comes and you get reassessed, it's pretty big. And there's other problems with assessment. One of my favorite organizations, Strong Tenants, has a blog recently about how generally houses below average in the community are, when they do sell, they sell lower than their assessed value, so they're actually paying more than their fair share of taxes, which is effectively a regressive tax. But again, these are things that, by and large, are not in the purview of the village leadership to change. However, I do think it's important that we, work with the town to make it easy for people to contest their assessments, right? There is a form and a board that reviews assessments and make sure that if, I've heard from a few residents while canvassing, that they've said effectively, if the town thinks my house is worth $180,000, I'd love to sell it to them tomorrow. We don't want people to feel that way. We don't want people to feel that they're being unfairly taxed. So we can help make that sort of process a little bit easier. Make sure that people do feel like if their assessment seems inaccurate, that they have a good process, or a good person who they can go through to get reevaluated.
Marc, you're next.
I interpreted the question, as it reads, and I certainly understand. I went to the Jefferson County Real Property Tax webpage. I saw tax parcels, and the satellite view was several years old. There was one point when I saw tax parcels, and the image was by Google Streets, which is easily 5 or 6 years old. So part of that is just technical, logistical with the county real that needs to register that with the real property tax office. So I would, in terms of showing upgrades, if you're talking about your own property and you're dissatisfied with what you see on there, you need to talk to them. If you're referring to other folks, like, wow, so-and-so just put up a whole gazebo in their in their backyard adjacent to their house, and it's not being shown. I don't think the assessor counts on photos from real property. I think the assessor drives by and does that his assessment that way. So that's all I really have on that.
Mr. Bray.
Okay, the question was, why are the parcels not on the GIS? And actually, again, this really isn't a village issue. There's not much the village mayor or village board could do about this. This is the county not being current on its website. The town of Hounsfield is beginning the process of revaluation on all the properties in town. They're taking pictures, measuring some outbuildings. This is something that was supposed to be done last year. It was postponed due to the pandemic. So hopefully after this is over, the GIS on the county's website will be updated. And that's about the best we can hope for on this thing.
All right, we're going to move on to questions that have been submitted that I don't believe you folks have seen yet. Let's start with Marc on this one, okay? The Stone Hospital owes the city's or the village's LDC $50,000. Loan payback is based on selling the building to a local developer. As mayor, you intend to push the foundation to finalize this important sale.
Well, I think certainly it's an issue that we're all familiar with, and the village board should continue to advocate for movement on this project. We're giving regular updates. We certainly, it's a $50,000 loan, so it's important to get loan payback. And I think essentially with the Stone Hospital, once that sale has gone through, it's going to make a world of difference on the lakefront. Over that.
Question would you push for it, would you?
I'm sorry?
Question was.
I said we would advocate for return on that loan. Absolutely.
Mr. Bray, next.
I think that the village board should absolutely push for this sale to happen as soon as it possibly can, and the loan should be paid back. As a board member, I had said that we could give this building away to the right people and it could pay the village back. And I just think this sale should happen as soon as it could, and the loan should be paid back.
Alex?
This is something that's been an ongoing issue. Jay's brings it up at most board meetings, and my understanding is that it's in progress, and the deal is currently with the attorneys. I do think there is with a number of projects in the village, I think we could do better to actually get a timeline from that attorney. Say, okay, rather than say this project is with the attorneys, when they see fit, they'll get back to us. We could hold them a little bit more accountable and say, we need to know when this is going to happen, so that we have an ETA, so we can let the public know, so that you're not just forced to come back every month and say, hey, is there an update? What the heck's going on every time? And I think, it may not actually expedite the process, but at least you'll have better oversight into how long it's taking.
All right, this next question, we'll start with James Bray for the answers. I understand the village is considering a proposal to provide overnight docking services at the Market Square Park as part of the revenue funding. Do you think this is a wise use of village staff and money rather than limiting it to a day, evening use, not overnight? What's your response to concerns about this public project conflicting with local businesses that provide the same service?
I don't think the village should be in the business of running a marina. When the village docks were proposed as part of the Ready project, I was in favor of the village docks, and this project has grown into something else as far as overnight
public-private partnerships. I discussed this dock project with Craig, who manages Eighty Point. And his concern was the village is saying that they're not going to allow overnight docking, but, you know, are we going to send, you know, Mr. Gleason down at 10 o'clock at night and say, we know you've had 17 martinis at Goodfellas, but you need to drive your boat away because you're not allowed beer over there? Obviously, if we have dock space, we're probably going to have people that need to leave the boat overnight or just expensive to do so. My suggestion to Craig was to come up with a proposal for Navy Point to actually manage the dock space and say, okay, well, rather than have the village hire someone to do it, they already have the infrastructure, they already have the billing, they already have the customer base. They could, you know, the village could pay them a commission or a fee so that they can manage it. It doesn't impact their business because now they can price it the same. So if something does happen to stay overnight, they're still getting paid back for the dock space, and the village takes a portion of that when it's for the docks. And there are ways to mitigate the sort of competing with local business problem. We certainly don't want to do nothing as a village because anything we do could be construed as competing with a local business, right? It's almost like saying, well, we have public water, but that's stopping somebody from running a private water business, so we can't do public water anymore. There are ways to preserve the small businesses that we do have and make sure that we work with them, not in competition with them. But we shouldn't, you know, say, the marinas, they have a monopoly on boats, we can't build docks for the village because we don't want to step on their toes. That's not a very practical way to go about that.
Marc?
Probably 18 years ago, the village did essentially look at private contracting as public dock. I believe at the time we rejected it after we looked into it. Again, I think the big piece was the competition between government and private business. And I understand it's a big concern. We're adding docks downtown. Our dock capacity is going to be 4 times what it is now. But it doesn't mean we have to allow overnight docking. We also, even if we allow 4 hours of docking during the day, as many villages do who have water, we need to be able to manage that. We have the harbor master role that the police typically have served as. I'm looking at a new strategy. I'm looking at the visitor center coordinator position to grow into much more of a manager position downtown, to really help us control our assets, meaning the docks, the historical sites, Marcus Park. So I'm looking at a whole new strategy for downtown in terms of management and oversight, and to make sure that if the docks need to be managed for 4-hour docking, meaning that somebody violates that, they'll get ticketed. We'll put a plan together with the coordination of that new position.
Alex, you'll start the next round. The question is, what can be done to improve the legal services and engineering services that the village receives?
Thanks. So I had a conversation with Mike yesterday, 2 days ago, I remember. And they're working on a new development in the Barrens for, I think it's 14 single windows. And he had a concern that he had put money for the village to pay for engineering and legal review of their permitting and their drawings. And that money had already been spent. It was estimated by the village's engineers and lawyers. And it's already been spent, and they need more money, and that money has not been estimated. So it's kind of an open question as to how much it's going to cost. One thing that he had mentioned was, when Molly was mayor, she had gone to the engineering and legal services and said, in order to review this deal, we've committed to the developer to this. You can't spend more than $5,000. There's no going over. It's not an open checkbook. I think there are incentive problems with requiring developers to pay legal and engineering review fees from the village and then not holding the village engineering and legal team to a reasonable estimation of their costs. We don't want to get into, letting developers get bled dry when they try to do development here. We're gonna have problems convincing people to build in the village. And I think all three of us have talked about how, with different flavors, but we all are pro development at Sackets Harbor. We think that it can help the village, and we don't want to discourage developers. So that's something that I think, as mayor, I would absolutely try to hold the services that we pay for, the engineering and legal services, to, if not meet their estimates, at least come close. I think that's important.
Marc, next.
Every month I review in detail our engineering and legal costs. I specifically look at those bills because I'm very concerned about the accountability. Not to say that they're not accountable, I'm just concerned about it. And without good review, things can slip through. Mistakes can happen. Now, I've also stated early on in this last term that I'm serving that, our contracted officials need to give reasonable estimates. The village board shouldn't be in the business of coming up with a dollar figure and throwing it at a developer saying it's going to be about 10 grand. And the minute they're at 11 grand, the village says you still owe it. The developer says, you said it was going to be 10 grand. Well, that happens, trust me. I'm really concerned about that. I want to do a review of large projects. Because when we talk about large projects, again, remember what I said, reducing fees for residents for small zoning changes, because we don't have legal review necessary for that. But we do for larger projects. We should look at and come up with a better estimate table for legal and for engineering. Legal probably is the one that we have the least amount of control over. Engineering, they have their own scales, and we can actually see what the industry does. But again, I think looking at it, coming up with a table for legal would be really an important piece for us, so we are upfront about developers. This is what we think is going to cost based on some historical data.
James Bray.
This is a fairly complicated issue, actually. As a village board member, I was tasked with reviewing a couple of years' worth of engineering and legal charges for several different projects for several different developers. We did a very in-depth review of all the charges, and a couple of things that come up is developers always say you're charging them too much. I'm a builder, I always say I'm being charged too much, we're not making any money. But the village has to be responsible so that the taxpayers don't end up paying these engineering and legal fees for developers' projects. We had an instance in this same review where a person had not paid enough, and then they sold the property and the village was unable to recoup these funds. So it's not that we charge too much. It's a complicated issue. Projects change. You give the best, and our planning board does an excellent job of estimating. We actually, after that review, made some recommendations to the planning board as far as how much fees to charge up front, depending on the size of the project, the scope of the project. So the villages, our fees are not out of line with other villages. And again, every developer is always going to tell you, you're charging me too much. We're not. We're protecting the taxpayer.
These next two questions are kind of mirror images of each other. I'm going to ask them both separately. question. We've been bringing our family to Sackets for 25 years, and we're now starting to have grandkids, very safe. I've heard some discussion of loosening liquor laws to encourage more liquor at the battlefield, concerts, and open models. What's your opinion on keeping Sackets family-friendly and safe and not become like Alex Bay?
I have no comment on the outstations.
Oh, come on.
I will say this. If you take the temperature of the village now, I think we have responsible ordinances. I'm not seeing a loosening, a permanent loosening of open container restrictions. Now I know that this year, by the way, the village board had lifted open container downtown because of coronavirus, just like last year. Even though we do that, people don't necessarily take advantage of it. This is not a village in which people are, prone to walking around with beer in their hand. Now, in terms of events, we approve every single event. There's a lengthy application. There's a time frame, and if the event, has a request for alcohol, there has to be the appropriate licensing and liability. I'm not feeling like there's anything that we need to jump on. I'm not looking, for the next shiny object here. I think if there were persistent problems, then that'd be another story. So I hope that family who comes, continues to come, and feels safe in this village. It's a great law enforcement contingency in this village, too, by the way. And they're here tonight, too, John.
Mr. Bray.
So I think it's important that Sackets remains a family-friendly destination. As Marc said, we don't have a problem with open container on our streets. When we do have events, they're tightly monitored, they're approved by the police department ahead of time, and with consideration of the village board. So I think that Sackets does need to remain the family-friendly destination that it is, and I don't think we need to loosen up our liquor laws.
Thanks. I think, I brought this up in the past with regard to the Historical Society's concerts on the battlefield. And being a state park, it's actually, there are no open container laws. Anyone who wants to can bring a six-pack, sit on a chair, drink a beer, watch the concert. And quite a few people do. I actually wasn't aware of this until I saw someone, I think the gentleman was probably in the 70s, just walking around during the concert with an enormous burgundy glass full of red wine. And I was like, maybe the rules are not what I thought they were. What I had suggested a few times was whether or not it be alcohol. The village should be proactive in trying to coordinate things with the different organizations, right? So the Historical Society does not have bandwidth to do more than they're already doing for those concerts. The concerts are awesome. They bring in hundreds of people, but most of those people don't spend very much money in the village. A lot of them come in, they sit, they enjoy the concert, and they leave. And I think it would be nice if we proactively said, let's get a few of our restaurants to put booths down. The Battlefield Eatery could sell quesadillas, the Sandwich Bar could sell sandwiches. They probably sell hundreds of dollars, whether or not they sell alcohol. And if they did sell alcohol, they'd probably make a decent amount more, but that's another question, and there's permitting issues there. But whether or not someone does sell it, it's legal for someone to just bring it in. And you'll notice quite a few people do that for the concerts. There are a lot of little things though that we could change. For example, Goodfellas has its patio seating where they're allowed to serve alcohol to their restaurant clientele, and the divider is just some planters. Whereas at the Sandwich Bar, because Jamie's tables are right on the sidewalk, if she did get a liquor license, she couldn't serve people there because there's no fence between the sidewalk and the table. And so to my mind, I'm wondering, what does that serve at the village if, I've seen quite a few people sit at Jamie's patio to listen to Andy Taylor play music across the street because they don't want to be in the thick of it. They want to sit and listen. She could probably make a few $100s a night on Friday and Saturday just serving, finger sandwiches and rosé to some of the senior citizens like to stand on their patio anyway. And those are the sort of things that I think we should look at changing. I don't think it would take years of concerted effort to turn Sackets Harbor into Ellis Bay. No one here is doing $1 shot night. People, young kids don't come here to party, and I don't think that's something we want to do or even could do if we tried. I think we can get a little more flexible and do more events without risk and turn it into a day.
We'll let you go with that. All right, here's the sort of the opposite question. We'll direct it to Mr. Bray to start. As new residents, we moved here for the hustle and bustle of Main Street, it's noise and shops. What will you do to attract more businesses here? Two will be closing within the month.
What will we do to attract more business?
What will you do to attract new business?
Well, I think we're doing what we can at this point by supporting our businesses that are here, supporting our residents, and growing the village to, this brings in more people, this brings in more business. Again, this is an opportunity. We have the LDC land. Perhaps some development there could bring some more businesses to town. And, again, the village, through the budget, supporting the marketing committee is part of that, supporting the chamber and the Can-Am Festival.
Alex, you're next.
Pacilio is leaving, and what's the other one? Anyway, we do have quite a few open spaces on Main Street. We have a couple offices, real estate offices just opened, and there's so many things we can do to improve Main Street. Number one, the most obvious is parking. We have parking issues on like random Thursdays in the summer, let alone when we have events or when there's a wedding here in the ballroom. Margaret graciously let the school have a prom here, so in exchange they let her use the school parking lot. I think that's an underused resource. It's actually why during the Can-Am Festival I organized the golf cart shuttles. We got a donation from Carl Schreck and Joe's to rent golf carts to a bunch of people in Morgia's Beach and some people out in Mountain Knoll. And he brought his golf carts to the village so we could run shuttles to and from the school parking lot. Super popular with parents of young kids. They're super popular among some of our elderly residents who appreciate being able to spend their energy walking to and from the different things at Can-Am rather than walking a mile just to get to the event in the first place. We have some stuff underway to improve parking in the village already, but I think there's a great number of things we can do to improve it. I talked with forget the name of the investment. There's a trolley in Watertown that was refurbished, and they won't let her use it there because it has a top speed of 25 miles an hour. So I would love to get it out here and have it run a shuttle from the barracks to Main Street to the school on Fridays and Saturdays, and just have this quaint mode of transport to help people get around the village. But there's a number of things we can do to help encourage people. And one is just call people, right? As mayor, I would love to just get on the phone and say, hey, Clayton Boat Tours, what's it going to take for you to do a tour in Sackets once a week, every single week? What do you need from us? What do you need do you need, different businesses to do a partnership with you? Do you need some money? Do you need some promotion? Marketing department, put you on your website. I've talked to some business owners. There's one woman who I bought furniture from who's talking about opening a furniture shop. And I emailed her last week, hey, would you ever consider running your boutique furniture repair shop in Sackets Harbor? We have some spaces. Those sort of things, it just takes a little bit of effort to push. We can improve the quality of the village just through sheer force of effort if we have the right people in charge.
I think this issue is a great issue for the chamber to be a leader. I think it's appropriate for the chamber, but the chamber's resources are, not great, right? And it's a small village. The plan that I've been referring to with our visitor center, perhaps we'll be able to provide some support for the Chamber of Commerce. And then some of that economic development planning can happen from the chamber. That's why I think the village can play the best role. Then it's just to collaborate and come up with some new strategies, and that's what I plan to do. For business growth, we have to do smart growth. I'm for, the LDC land, which is the bit that is still available aside from the battlefield, the other side, next to John Ken. I'm for small office park. Bring in more people that work in our village and will then dine in our village and shop in our village. That's really important. And by the way, talking about shopping, we now have a new grocery store coming back to Sackets Harbor. Really pleased to hear that, and we put that out there last month. I think that overall, just coordinating with the existing business community, working with the chamber, and then one other kind of nuance. I think that when you think about the village of Sackets Harbor, people mostly think of it as historic tourism. And that's okay, that's a good thing. I think that brings the right kind of visitor into this village. We need to make sure that those assets, those tourism assets are healthy so that businesses decide to come in. I guess to just sum it up, when you think about who locates to Sackets Harbor business-wise, it's going to be someone who needs traffic in their store 12 months of the year. Now, we're lucky if we can get folks in about 6 months of the year. Most businesses downtown will tell you get like 10 or 12 weeks. We're working on it. I think this was a great summer season, by the way. Most businesses have told me it's summer season. We have to spread that good news to other businesses, other potential businesses. That's where the chamber will come in greatly to assist in that.
We'll do one more question, and we'll move on to closing statements, and we'll start with you, Alex, for this one. What environmental initiatives do you plan to have if you are elected?
Thanks. I think one of the things that was brought up on the garbage Facebook discussion was actually that there are federal grants for waste management in watershed areas. So I think that would be a good start. There's also there's a project underway ready to do James Bray lighting. And then we also have it's pseudo-environmental. It's the project. I'm not sure if everyone here is familiar, but there was a group of surveyors from a few different research universities that brought out some really cool toys. They had robotic submarines and drones, fancy magnetometers, and they were surveying underwater maps that were way too powerful. And they're looking at getting what's it called? Sanctuary certification for the upper part of Lake Ontario, where affords us some resources, and I think it's important for the village to fight for that visitor center. It's probably going to go to Oswego. Oswego was the originator of the project, but I talked to the reps from NOAA, and they said that they would likely have an office here as well. And they do things like mark off the wreckage with buoys so that people don't accidentally anchor their fishing boat there. I think I'd love to get the recycling center back up and running. We could do it just basically the same way that we had before, with some cameras managed by the village. And so far as that's a great initiative, I think that's one. I'm not sure what else the question Mr. Hanley, but I'll be open to it first.
Marc, you're next.
Repeat that one more time.
The question is, what environmental initiatives would you plan to have if you are elected?
Great. Well, I've got two really that are important, I think, to a lot of people, and they dovetail into tourism and visitation as well. The first is our 1812 trail. We're so blessed in this village to have a trail, a 6-mile trail, inside of the village. You can hop on in many different areas in the village. We're continuing to improve that. We're working on, some more viable trail in Madison Barracks as well. We need to be able to take care of that and let folks enjoy the great outdoors here, right here in the village. That's one thing. Secondly, this is a little more detailed, next year, we're going to be applying for a downtown revitalization initiative. As part of our New York State Regional Economic Development. Part of that has to include environmental improvements. Now, in our Ready project, we already have, I can't remember the number now, but we have electric car charging stations coming to the village. That's going to be great, because we're going to be ahead of the curve a little bit. A little village like this, 1,500 people having 2 or 3 charging stations. That sends a message to folks that we're thinking about the future. I think our improved water treatment plant will help to make sure that Lake Ontario is healthy. Back to our Ready project downtown, we're going to lift that Market Square Park up so that we can hopefully not have the damage that we had for 2 years with high water. Hopefully the state the International Joint Commission has a better plan now, but in the event that they don't, we're going to be ready for it too. So those are just some of the environmental projects that I'm interested in.
Mr. Bray.
One of the environmental projects that we have going is the tree inventory, and Sackets Harbor, most of us know, has been designated as Tree City USA 2 years in a row. We're doing an inventory now. I think you may see people walk around the village just this week doing that. As we all know, trees create oxygen, take carbon dioxide out of the air, so that's a good thing. It's a nice look for the village. Another important thing that you could consider environmentally related is we have to do a little rebuild on our sewer plant outfall, which is being funded 95% through the Ready funding from the last flood. And then our new water intake is probably one of our most important environmentally related things that they give us our clean water. Our water intake now is 100 years old and has been on the need for replacement for several years.
Okay, let's get some closing remarks from the candidates. Let's start with Marc.
Thank you. Thanks again, everybody, for being here tonight, listening to us. I'm here again because I have that passion for public service. And I really mean it when I say I want to be your mayor. I want to work in partnership, build a thriving community in Sackets Harbor. I just have to tell you a little bit of the story. When I was a kid in Utica, New York, a bunch of us said, the new mayor has an open door policy. We need to go downtown and visit the guy. So we got on our bikes, drove all the way downtown, went to the mayor's office. Yep, it was an open door policy. His door was open and we sat on his couch while he conducted business all afternoon. Never paid us any attention. I'll never forget that. If you're going to promise something, especially in a leadership position, you need to meet. The second thing that I'm bringing to you is the notion, again, as a kid. I don't know where this came from, but every time we travel to a new city, travel to the city next door where we live, I would always look around and say, wow, how can the mayor of this city or this village allow this blight to be? That doesn't make any sense to me. Since I was a kid, to this day, I've traveled around the country, traveled throughout the state. These are the reasons why I'm here. I have so much experience in government, both village and the state, and that's valuable for the village board. And I want to be your mayor because I can bring that to you. I can bring essentially decades of leadership. I've served in senior management for the bulk of my career. And I just want to offer it to you all, along with my strategies and plans, and continue public service, serving you each and every day in Sackets Harbor. Thank you very much.
James Bray.
Thank you all for coming here. Alex and I were talking, we got here a little early, and he mentioned how many people that we think would be here, and I told him we're very lucky in Sackets Harbor because we have a great core of people who are interested in local politics. thank you all for coming. We as candidates, I think I can speak for all of us and say, we truly appreciate this opportunity to talk to you. I will work hard. If you would like me to be your mayor, I will always let you know how I feel. I will answer your questions. I will respect your opinion even if I disagree with it, and I will treat everyone the same. Thank you.
Alex?
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Scott. So, what I think for the core reason I want to be mayor of Sackets Harbor is I think that we're not doing all we could to take advantage of everything Sackets has to offer. We live in a very unique place. Almost nowhere in the country has the unique combination of our natural beauty, our history, and walkability. I think when I hear things like Main Street doing fine, and I do think it was a good year, but I don't see any of these businesses say, oh, we're awash in customers. We don't know what we'd do if we had no business. I think the village can do a lot to extend the season that the businesses in Sackets Harbor have customers. I think we can do a lot to change the perception of the village. You know, I'm not 100% done. I've gone to about 450 doors and I have 200 left. Trying to introduce myself to everyone in the village at least who will answer the door, riling up literally every dog in town by ringing doorbells. But I've heard from multiple people that, you know, they have ideas, they have opinions, questions that they have felt don't want answered. They've learned that it's sort of a learned helplessness. They're not encouraged by the village leadership to go and participate. They don't expect to get a lot of answers or to get buy-in. I think we need to change the perception to be something of an inclusive, where when someone brings a proposal or an idea to the village board, they're expecting to get a yes. How do we make this work? What do we need to do? Not a no, we can't do that because it's insurance or paperwork. Personally, I think I've tried to run a campaign to demonstrate how much work I'll put into this role, and I think actions speak louder than words. And my goal has been to demonstrate to everybody how much I'm willing to do for this community in as little time as possible. And I think Marc and James are great guys. I think they want good things for this village. I just think that I'm willing to put in more time, more effort than most people think is rational to this job. And I would like your vote in a week, 2 weeks. Thanks very much.
All right, on that note, let's give a round of applause for the candidate. And I don't mean to prolong things, but before I turn the mic back over to management, we have a round of applause for the Chamber of Commerce for sponsoring the event. Marc,
a big thank you to all of you. This is one of the reasons I love Sackets Harbor. I'm here in the back. One of the reasons I love Sackets Harbor is because of the community being so strong. And every one of you being here shows how strong Sackets Harbor is. And to the point of caring, who's going to lead us, right? So this is important. We're coming together in one room, we're sharing ideas, we're questioning ideas. It's very important moving forward and moving Sackets Harbor into the future. So I think you should give yourselves a round of applause for caring and being such a strong part of this community. Because really we couldn't do it or lead anything if it wasn't for you. I want special thanks to Sackets Harbor Executive Committee, Sackets Harbor Chamber of Commerce Executive Committee for pulling together and working so hard. Huge thank you to Margaret and Baldwin for allowing this event to happen. And thank you to the awkward personality. Thank you, Scott, for coming out and moderating. I'll see you soon.